I'm struggling with this one. At the 11th hour, our former Prime Minister Boris Johnson is brought back to a Conservative rally. It's his only appearance during the election campaign, 48 hours before voters head to the polls. Start with you, David. You're not a fan. Is he a vote winner still?
There's a section of the population, I think you probably do like him.
Okay.
So look, this is one of the fundamental difficulties with the Conservative Party is that, in a way, they're kind of two parties in one, and there's a sort of set of the electorate that really dislike him. And I did a little bit of campaigning for one of my former colleagues last week, and it was coming up on the doorstep, real loathing for Boris Johnson. But there is another set of people who voted Conservative in 2019 who still like him. He's not as popular as he was, but they still, it's still good old Boris. And he does appeal to those people. And I read a piece for the New Statesman saying he should go to Clacton, because Clacton is full of the type of people who like Boris Johnson. And, given that there is a huge difference between what Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage think about Ukraine, he could kind of go there and, stir it up. And by the way, most people are with Boris Johnson on this, not with Nigel Farage.
Oh, absolutely. And he said, didn't he, don't let the Putinistas deliver the Corbynistas.
Yes, exactly. So he can still deliver a line. I think, probably both parties will object to that being characterised that way. Labour, perhaps with more credibility, but he can do that in his box office. But, it does come with risks. And I saw, one of my former colleagues, Hugh Merriman, tweeted this morning, well, this slightly puts me off voting Conservative. And I think there are others, in that category. He's a very polarising, divisive figure. He is not the future of the Conservative Party. I'd hate to think that if the Tories do a bit better, everyone will go, it's because Boris Johnson intervened at the last minute. I've no doubt Nadine Dorries is ready for that tweet in that eventuality. He's a sort of divisive figure, but it's a sense of desperation at this point. They'll pull any lever. If it brings in a few more voters, then great. But you're certainly running a risk that he'll put off more than he'll bring in.
Well, exactly. I mean, it's saying something, isn't it, George, that the Conservatives feel that the best chance they have is wheeling out the man who ultimately sowed the seeds of their demise.
Yeah, look, I think there are two things going on. I think I agree with David that it's a risk, but it's a calculated risk. And I think if you're looking to win over people who've defected to reform, or people who voted Conservative in 2019 but are now disillusioned, perhaps stay at home, Boris Johnson is one of the few political figures who might be able to change their mind, because he does have that standing with certain groups of voters. I mean, Rishi Sunak reportedly texted him, said, is there anything you can do? I mean, that shows how desperate they are, because they're not close. And that was evident yesterday. Boris Johnson didn't even mention Rishi Sunak. There was no picture together. So this is the second point, which this is also about Boris Johnson's post-election life.
Do you see a comeback?
Well, another former leader, Theresa May, was getting some praise on social media for being a real sort of trooper, going out on the doorstep. Everyone knows that she's had lots of differences with the direction others have taken the party, but she's out there putting in the hard yards, and the members will thank her for that. And Boris Johnson does want to retain some standing within the Conservative tribe. He's got his memoir coming out. And if he can say, I did my bit during the campaign, albeit a 5-minute speech, no one can say he just stayed on the sidelines. So I feel as if this was him looking to the post-election narrative as much as the current narrative.
Do you share that feeling, David?
I do. And look, I think Boris Johnson is one of these people who will always wonder if the call may come that a desperate party may finally turn to him, that they recognise the grievous mistake and injustice that was committed in 2022 as he sees it, and that he rides into, to provide the rescue. There's a movie going on in his head and he's the hero, and he is one of those people, and he'll think that Starmer's going to be hopeless as Prime Minister, and he'll put up taxes and he'll betray Brexit, and by the time we get to 2029, old Bozo will be back to save the nation. I'm sure that's to some extent at least a scenario that was playing out in his mind. And yes, whether he's been stung by the pictures of Theresa May canvassing, or I'd like to think the piece about him going to Clacton. That I suspect it's not, but if it was well, if he turns up in Clacton this afternoon, then I'm definitely taking the credit.
The Putin Easter attack was there, it's this sort of Churchillian sense as well, isn't it? And he does in his own head liken himself to Churchill. That's very obvious.
Churchill came back.
Yeah,
Churchill came back, and not a young age as well.
Yeah.
So
51.
So
6 years after a Labour landslide.
You're right. You heard it here first.
No, you can't completely sort of write him off, and he sees himself as a man of destiny, and who knows how destiny is going to call.
But there is something odd, isn't there? At the same time as Boris Johnson coming back, albeit pretty briefly, that Suella Braverman's writing in the Telegraph that the Tories are finished, basically.
I mean, look, I expect to see all those pieces afterwards, and it's all very well for those of us who are now, who've exited the stage and are now commentators to write pieces about why the Tories are done for. But if you're an actual Conservative candidate with aspirations to lead the party, you'd think you would just wait a day or two. It's stuff like that that makes me think that Suella is. I don't know how much we want to get into sort of talking leadership speculation, but it's what I would think to be an error of judgment from her perspective, that means that quite a few people who perhaps naturally ought to support her quite question. She's a bit off the rails, and I think that's an error of judgment to go. I mean, obviously disagree with her critique, but it's the one, she's making it powerfully, and it's the one that we're going to hear a lot of from 10 o'clock onwards on Thursday. But as a serving candidate to put that in the paper on the day before, I don't think is going to win her a lot of friends amongst whoever is left in the parliamentary party.
No, and I do want to end today's podcast talking about the future of the Conservative Party, the leadership, and of course on yesterday's podcast, Rachel and Freddie went through some of the potential candidates. So if you missed that, do go back and take a listen. But it's interesting, in your piece last week, David, you were happy to see, hopefully, sort of the collapse of Reform and the peak Farage and what that would mean for the future. But interestingly, Suella Braverman has been, I think, the only serious contender, or certainly the only name that has said she would welcome Farage into a future Conservative Party. Who do you see as the front runners, given, the projections as well, about who might lose their seat? Who's left? Yeah,
I mean, I suppose having said that, I don't think Suella will do, and I stick by that. The fact that she is now the only candidate that is, if you like, pro-Farage is interesting positioning. I think that Farage has kind of almost overdone it. That his sort of campaign has been more destructive of the Conservative Party than it might have been, and then it makes it pretty well impossible for there to be a subsequent reconciliation, a united right of which Farage is part. So I don't think that the Farage takeover of the party, which I think a month or so ago looked quite plausible, that doesn't seem to be on the cards. The fact that people like Priti Patel are saying, no, you're not coming in. But I do still think that the instinct of the party will be, we've still got to close off his space. Okay, it might not be Farage, but we've got to get Farage's voters. And there's too many of them, and they'll look at the votes that went to Reform on Thursday and go, there are people and we've got to go after them. And a leadership candidate who can plausibly do that, I think, is quite well placed. So which is why I think it will go to the right. It's not what I want. I've long, in the New Statesman, long been saying Priti Patel is one to watch. Okay, she's not going to reunite the right with Farage. She may well be someone who says, I would bring back Boris Johnson, and she may well get an endorsement from Boris Johnson. I think she's one to watch. Obviously, Kemi Badenoch is also a plausible candidate. If Penny Mordaunt survives, she'll be also a formidable candidate. I assume Tom Tugendhat will run from the other side of the party, but the right will start as favourites, because I think the immediate reaction of the Conservative Party will be, oh, look at all those Reform votes, we've got to go after them, ignoring the fact that a large majority of the country will be voting for centre-left parties. And you only have to go back to 2015. UKIP in that election got 12-13% of the vote, and the Conservatives still got a parliamentary majority. Okay, Reform might get more than 12-13%, But it probably won't be much more than that. The issue is too many people are voting Labour and Liberal Democrat, and that's the issue the Conservatives need to address.
And if you were still a Conservative member, who would be your choice of leader?
Well, I'd probably be cursing them. I'd probably be a curse for me to sort of declare. Well, look, for someone like me, a candidate from the centre ground who would appeal, so whether that's Tom Tugendhat, whether that's Victoria Atkins, we'll see. Those are people who I think have got an ability to appeal to, those who don't identify as kind of right wingers and so on, who can move the party onwards. My suspicion is that is not going to be where the Conservative Party wants to go initially. And, the history of parties going into opposition is that they tend to move towards their kind of core support. They tend to move, Labour moves to the left, Tories move to the right until, they recognise that that's not working. It's quite striking. We've had 3 governments in my memory that have won from opposition, 97, 2010, and now, Keir Starmer this week. They have all moved their party in a more pragmatic direction, not seek to appeal to activists, but to the general voter, and come across as sort of pragmatic, broadly centrist. That's the impression they've given, at least compared to where they were.
So you say, interestingly, you lose and you bounce out, and then you come back to the centre to win.
Yes, eventually. And it's just that how quickly, how long does it take to learn that lesson?
I mean, George, interestingly, what do we know about the Conservative, both MPs that were and candidates who are most likely to keep or win seats, though? Is that going to be a problem for the Conservatives? Will we get a broad church, do you think, or will it not be where they want to be?
I think it will be a broad church, actually, so that if you look at the safest seats, and quite a lot of them are in the east of England, some of them are candidates from the right of the party, but some are One Nation Tories. You've got Will Tanner, for instance, the Sunak aide standing in Bury St Edmunds. Rupert Harrison, former aide to George Osborne from the sort of Cameroon wing of the party, what's left of it. He's one to watch. If he wins in Bicester, he'll be a major figure in the party. So it's not going to be Bravermanites and sort of Farageist fellow travellers. So it will be a mix. I think the most important thing is that there is not an outstanding candidate for leader, and it'd be silly for the party, I think, to pretend that there's someone who, through sheer force of personality, can transform the party. That figure doesn't exist. There is no Conservative politician who's sort of unusually popular at the moment, who's sort of caught the imagination of voters. Perhaps someone who's only recently come into politics, who has a pre-existing standing. The most important thing is the strategy they choose. And here I think they could potentially learn from Keir Starmer. David's already alluded to that, but he pulled off something that perhaps people didn't think was possible, which is that he won the leadership election by pitching to not necessarily a Corbynite membership, but a membership that had voted for Corbyn. Mm-hmm. And he did that through the now sort of infamous 10 pledges. And he needed to do that to win the election, because there were people who thought, look, Rebecca Long-Bailey will win by default. So he did that, but then he pivoted towards the centre over time. Now, I think the question is, can a Conservative candidate pull off the same feat, which is, you have your 10 pledges for the base, and then you perform this sort of strategic pivot towards the centre, because that's what they'll have to do if they want to win. Keir Starmer said, I'm having to do the work of sort of Neil Kinnock, John Smith and Tony Blair in one term. I mean, the next Conservative leader is going to have to do the same in terms of, can they do a David Cameron in one term? David Cameron started with fewer than 200 seats, so actually didn't have many seats. It was not a good result actually in 2005. The financial crisis helped, and there was an unpopular government. I think they can draw heart from the example of Keir Starmer, but also of how volatile the electorate is. So in a sense, even if they go below 100, which is clearly quite possible, maybe even probable, I don't think people should declare the Conservative Party dead.
Do you think, George, if they come third, though, that's not the end of the Conservative Party? I mean, that would be the worst result conceivable.
Yeah, and that really heightens the question of then how do you unite the right? Because there is the risk then, I think, of a realignment where One Nation Tories, both in terms of voters and also candidates, MPs, go to the Liberal Democrats, and that leaves the Conservatives as a right populist force. But there's some commentators who think that's how they win. They look to Marine Le Pen, they look to Giorgia Meloni, they'll look to Donald Trump in the US. So that then, I think, really heightens the stakes and leads to a more vigorous argument within the party. If they have a 97-star result, circa 150, 160 seats, then it's really, I think, about, OK, so who can unite us and put us in a position where we can plausibly challenge Labour at the next election?
Agree?
Yes. Yeah. No, it is a more volatile electorate, and that does give any party some hope. My fear for the Tory party is that politics is more fundamentally realigning, and it can't quite decide which party it wants to be. It's sort of made that jump towards being a populist party in 2019, but actually you can't sustain that in government. It all starts to go wrong, which is what happened. Then you've had a sort of Rishi Sunak trying to appeal to sort of both groups and not really succeeding either way. Possibly a more skilled politician would somehow have pulled that off, but he's not succeeded. And you've ended up with a Conservative Party that doesn't really quite represent anybody. And the nagging doubt you must have about the Conservatives is, can we again have a party that is broad enough to take in the kind of populist right and take in the kind of more centrist, liberal, metropolitan voters? Can it be a broad church party again? And the last few years it's been really tested, and it doesn't look as if it can pull that off and still offer some kind of coherence to the public. And then you are starting to question, existentially, how does the Conservative Party operate? And the temptation, I fear, will be, well, OK, we have to make a decision, but we'll do it as a populist party of the right. And as George says, you look at Meloni, you look at Le Pen, you look at Trump and think, well, that could be viable. And there are more votes on the populist right than there are on the populist left. So you can bumble along. You'll still exist. You just won't be in government very often.